Howdy there, Isaac here, and today we'll be doing a what if I've been outlining for quite some time. What if Perfect Cell, no, not the embryo, but the future terror himself, survived his encounter with the Z-Fighters? There's lots of what ifs where Cell is reprogrammed or turned good via fighting with Goku, but honestly, today I'd like to do something a little different. Today's what if will be a little longer since it's the first part and we have a lot to do. So, without further ado, let's see what may have happened if Cell survived. The story starts now. Alright, so Gohan's transformation into Super Saiyan 2 would go the same, along with Cell being beaten back into his second form. The Bugman attempts to blow himself up, and Goku teleports them away. And here is where the story begins to change. As Cell regenerated and floated within the void, he began to think about how not only Gohan, but Goku made a fool out of him. Cell had pushed all the right buttons to make Gohan transform, which was Goku's plan. He played Cell like a fiddle. Goku had beaten him not only just in general, but through his son, beating Cell as a father as well, since Gohan easily destroyed the Cell Juniors. Thinking about his defeat made the Bugman quite livid, and with the power coursing through his veins, he could go and beat Gohan then and there. But no. Even now, they were barely even in terms of strength. Cell's fighting spirit and lust for vengeance were strong, especially after feeling the pain of losing those Cell Juniors, something he likely inherited from King Piccolo. But unlike those that came before him, Cell would learn to play the long game. Yes, Frieza, Vegeta, Piccolo, they all never knew when to quit and fight another day. But Cell was different. Yes, he would have his revenge, but like Goku, it wouldn't be through his hands. It'd be through his progeny. It'd be a victory on all fronts, one which the bio-android could watch unfold from afar. Cell began floating throughout the cosmos, thinking about how his son, this new Cell Jr., would go on to beat Gohan and destroy the Earth. But it all had to start somewhere, which meant Cell would need to create and train him. Upon arriving on a rather beautiful world, one which resembles Earth, though more green than blue, Cell would begin the process of birthing his son. This took much more time than with the Cell Juniors, since Cell needed to put thought into this one. Much like how King Piccolo could control what his offspring looked like, at least to some degree, I believe Cell could do the same. And so, upon thinking about how humans were born, and thinking about how Gohan grew and got stronger, Cell would finally birth the perfect offspring, which came out in its larval form. Cell figured that the best way to raise a strong warrior was to, well, literally raise it from the ground up. This offspring would grow and learn, unlike how Cell was born simply knowing everything. Since this creature was something new, and not just a copy, Cell thought it deserved a proper name. After about a day of watching the little bugger wriggle around and occasionally absorb space bunnies, Cell decided on a name, Soma, after somatic stem cells. This guy, in Cell's mind at least, would be adaptable and strong, much like how stem cells were. And since Cell was the original progenitor, then that'd likely be their last name. It all worked so well. Anyways, it'd take a couple of days for Soma to molt, so Cell decided to explore the world. From what he could sense, there were rather powerful life forms on the planet, though they were nothing compared to him. The Bugman flew up into the sky and over to a nearby city, which sort of resembled old Greek or Roman cities with their architecture. There were several blue humanoids walking around, all or most of which had orange hair. From the sky, Cell would listen in on the various conversations the peasants were having, ultimately learning that the planet they were on was called Hera, and those people were Herons. If you don't know, that means these people are the same race as Bojack and his crew. Speaking of Bojack, Cell watched as this rather tough-looking group of Herons walked up to the city and began looting it. The group, being Bojack and his crew, absolutely destroyed the city guard, remarking that their race had gone soft. This excited Cell. The sound of the denizens panicking, the explosions, the strong fighters, it was enough to make his Saiyan blood boil. The bio-android raced in, kicking Bujin and Beto into a nearby building before facing Zangia, Kogu, and most importantly, Bojack. Hello there, allow me to introduce myself. My name is... Bujin and Beto immediately raced out from the nearby buildings, using their psycho threads to ensnare Cell and begin zapping his power. Zangia joined in, reinforcing the threads while Kogu drew his sword and swung at the Bugman, the squad all smiling wickedly. However, as quick as their smiles appeared, they went away when Cell dodged Kogu's strike and broke through the psycho threads. Oh, come on! You could have at least let me introduce myself! The bio-android teleported over and kicked Bujin in the stomach, causing the Heron to double over and lose consciousness. This surprised Cell, as he thought the minion for sure could take a kick like that. Oh well, he'd have to be more careful next time. Bojack, seeing one of his minions taken out so easily, decided to get involved, charging the intruder along with Kogu, who had just gone into his full power state. The two Herons were able to catch the Bugman by surprise, allowing them to actually land a couple hits on him, until he powered up. From the sidelines, Zangia and Beto would attempt to land a few sneaky blasts, but Cell easily sent them back at their casters, causing the two to take some serious damage. Next was Kogu, who got kicked up into the air, only to be sent right back into the ground with a double axe handle, creating a huge crater. However, while his minions were getting absolutely wrecked, Bojack had powered up and managed to deliver a devastating gut punch to the bio-android. The two began throwing hands, their powers being relatively even, with Cell having a slight edge over his opponent. See, Bojack is used to being the stronger combatant and is much more of a brawler type, while Cell has many different techniques and isn't a stranger to fighting strong opponents. Over the course of nearly an hour, Cell whittled the pirate down, slowly gaining more and more of the upper hand against him. Bojack, getting frustrated that he was losing and actually getting hurt for once, made some distance between him and Cell and charged up his most powerful blast, the Galactic Buster. Oh, is the Jolly Green Giant ready to end this little fight? That's too bad. I was really starting to enjoy hitting your smug face. Cell yelled out, charging up a Kamehameha. The two beams met, and Cell was thoroughly surprised at the strength Bojack had left, though it still wasn't enough. Cell powered up once more, and his Kamehameha swallowed up Bojack, ending the space pirate in an instant. Or so he thought. The bio-android felt a very faint energy source coming from where Bojack was. He flew over to find what very little was left of the space pirate. He clearly wasn't good for fighting anymore, although he may have one last use. Cell stretched his tail out and absorbed the pirate. His DNA may have uses later down the line, and he was a good enough snack. The android went to leave, before feeling the 4 faint key signatures left on the battlefield, with one being not so faint. That was Zangia, who witnessed the entire fight and the subsequent absorption of her boss. Cell could just off her, or even absorb her, but he saw other uses for her strength. While Kogu was stronger, this woman was easily the 3rd strongest of her group, and it'd be a shame to let that strength go to waste. The android flew on over, Zangia freezing up and backing away, but Cell assured her that he had no intention of fighting anymore. The Bugman offered to let her live, with the catch that she had to help train his child. If not, her fate would be the same as her boss. Zangia, having to choose between life and death, chose the obvious answer, though she didn't exactly jump for joy. With that settled, the two flew off to where Cell had left Soma, them leaving Kogu, Beto, and Bujin to their fates. Based on the elevated power surge, Cell guessed Soma might have molted, and upon arriving at his location, he'd come upon a rather odd scene. Soma looked just like Imperfect Cell, although he was much smaller, being around 5 feet tall, and he had a bright yellow color to him. His tail was also narrower, and there seemed to be some slight protrusions on his wrists, but Cell didn't really care right now. At the moment, all the Bugman cared about was that his son was here and would grow up to be a tough, menacing creature. There we go! Zangia, this is Soma, and just look at him! I can't wait to see what menacing... Daddy! Soma yelled out, running towards Cell and giving him a big hug, catching the perfect Bugman off guard and causing Zangia to chuckle a bit at this menacing creature. Oh, yes, hugs are nice, but it's hardly sufficient training. If we're going to turn you into a killing machine, we'll need to do something about that meager power level. Soma pulled away, asking what training was, which caused Cell to groan, realizing this kid was, indeed, a kid. He didn't know how such a mistake could happen. All he did was make another Cell Jr., but included traits from Gohan. Wait, perhaps he made Soma a little too much like Gohan. This called for a little test. Cell ordered Zangia to begin fighting Soma, with some hesitation from the Heron. However, Cell assured her it'd be fine and ordered her to assault the kid. Soma, being an innocent boy, looked from his father to the blue girl, asking if she was a friend. However, he soon found that she wasn't, as she began her assault, instantly pummeling him into the ground. Cell watched on, waiting for the second his son would get angry and destroy Zangia. But instead, Soma curled up and began to cry, which caused Zangia to stop. Cell, I don't think this kid knows anything about fighting, Zangia said, looking towards the Bugman. Yeah, tell me about it. Cell pointed a finger towards Soma, thinking about offing the brat and trying again. But the imperfect creature reached out and called to his father. This look, the feeling of someone needing and looking to you for comfort, it struck something deep within Cell. Something he didn't know was even there, or how to process. Cell sighed and walked over, lifting his son up and dusting him off. You have a long way to go before you can stand up for yourself. You're nothing like me. I knew everything the second I was born. Let's start with the basics though. Proper fighting form. And so, for the next year, Cell, Soma, and Zangia would train, with the blue villainess mostly being a punching bag, though Soma always held back on her. Soma was like Gohan in the fact that he didn't much care for fighting, nor hurting others, but Cell didn't care. They trained hard and sparred even harder. Bruises, scrapes, and even broken bones were a common occurrence when Cell and Soma fought, much to the dismay of the latter, whose regeneration wasn't quite as good as his father's. In this time, Zangia and Soma began to grow closer, with the former taking on a sort of cool aunt role. She didn't especially enjoy fighting the bug creature, but despite his monstrous look, when Cell wasn't around, he was very bright and cheery. He seemed to light the whole forest up with joy and wonder about the world and its nature, constantly asking Zangia about the various space fauna. This was enough to slowly make Zangia like and care for the boy, often treating his cuts and scrapes after the intense sparring sessions. Despite her quite rude or brash nature, Soma liked hanging around and even sparring with Zangia, only disliking when Cell called out his holding back. Now, as Zangia and Soma grew to see each other as pseudo-family, the same wasn't exactly true for Cell. The perfect Bugman certainly had softened up a bit, but he was still focused on strengthening Soma and turning him into a fighting machine. Zangia resented the man for it, but Soma never seemed to dislike him. Quite the opposite, actually. Soma idolized his father's strength and worked hard to be like him, wishing to earn words of praise and spend time with him. In the end, Soma simply wanted to make his father proud, even if it tore him apart on the inside. Eventually, despite his immense holding back, Soma would become strong enough to easily beat Zangia in these sparring sessions. And one fateful day, Cell ordered the child to finish her off. Soma immediately turned back to Cell, pleading for her to be spared. But the Bugman didn't listen. No, her only use now is to teach you the brutality of a fight. This is what happens when you lose a fight, Soma. You die. What about me then? I lost 100 fights to her and you let me live? Soma pleaded. The two had slight arguments before, but this was the first time he had openly challenged and gone against his father. His whole body was shaking with both fear and adrenaline. Fights were scary, but standing up to his father, it was terrifying. "This is different. You're far more important than she is. Now, finish her off or I will," Cell ordered once again, giving his son a menacing look. Soma looked from his father to Zangia, who had a terrified and solemn look on her face. She whispered that it was okay, that she wouldn't blame him for doing what he needed to do, but the child just couldn't do it. Seeing this, Cell sighed and closed his eyes, lifting a finger towards Zangia. He fired a death beam, only for it to be repelled right back at him. Cell opened his eyes, and before him was an angry, no, livid Soma. "I said no!" Soma's power was rising, him no longer holding back as he raced towards Cell and delivered a heavy punch to his stomach. This attack actually managed to hurt Cell, but he was also smiling, having finally made his son stop holding back. Soma followed the punch up with several more attacks, landing a few good combos on his father. "Zangia is like family to me. She's important to me. How could you possibly justify finishing her off? What kind of father are you?" Cell began to power up and overtake his progeny, beginning to parry and even land a few blows of his own. As the two fought, Soma's rage quickly simmered down, until Cell punched him with enough force to send him flying into the ground. Finally back to his senses, Soma immediately stood up and bowed to his father. I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said, father. But please, spare Zangia. For me at least." Cell, with his Saiyan blood slowly calming down, finally realized just what his son had said. He knew Zangia was like an aunt to him, yet thought Soma would have offed her all the same. But he should have known better. The Bugman thought his son was the problem this whole time, but maybe it was possible Cell really was a bad parent? No, Cell couldn't accept something like that, or at least wouldn't admit it. He dusted himself off and faced Soma. I didn't even realize you had said something. Say, I'm sick of this planet. How about we go off to somewhere with better gravity, huh? Get a little gravity training in?" There was a brief tension between the three, but things soon calmed down and they began getting ready for space travel. While Cell and Soma were able to breathe within the vacuum of space, Zangia wasn't, so the three ended up commandeering a ship, much to Cell's annoyance. The trio traveled for several months until eventually finding planet Zune, the home planet of Pui Pui. Upon landing on the planet, the trio's ship would be surrounded by many Zune Saiyan guards. However, as fast as they gathered there, they were overtaken by an excited Cell. From the ship, he had sent several high key signatures, and sure, these guys were weak, but they could at least survive a punch from him, so it was a win in his book. Zangia and Soma joined in the fight, though only to protect the ship from being damaged, but the two did have a bit of trouble adjusting to the new gravity. Sure, they were strong, but when your body is 10 times heavier, it definitely affects your ability to dodge and throw a punch. Eventually, most of the guards were defeated, and it seems all hope is lost. That is, until Pui Pui shows up. The remaining guards would cheer as Pui Pui raced in and began fighting Soma, who had actually already knocked out most of the guards. Zangia attempted to step in, but she was already having trouble against a group of guards herself. Cell, from the sidelines, having already taken care of his group of guards, watched Soma fight off the Zune hero. The two swapped hands for a while, with Soma being the stronger opponent, but Pui Pui had far more experience and tricks up his sleeve. Eventually, Soma began getting overwhelmed, this culminating in Pui Pui launching a huge ki blast point blank in the android's face, blowing off half of it. This managed to catch Cell's attention, causing him to race over and begin fighting the Zune. Despite Pui Pui being the strongest on the planet, he was still no match for Cell, despite being even in terms of trash talking. Soon, the Zune Saiyan was beaten into the ground, unable to move or continue fighting. though Cell didn't bother with a finishing blow, partly due to Soma watching. With several hundred more guards approaching and both Zangia and Soma struggling, Cell instead thought of a better solution. "You're strong, far stronger than the other inhabitants of this planet. Now, I could blow your whole race away and take this place for myself, or I could spare everyone here. All I ask is I'm allowed to train my brat using the elevated gravity here. What do you say?"
What? Why would I let an evil creature like you stay on this planet? We can defeat you,
Pui Pui said, weakly standing up to face Cell once more. "Because I sense it within you. The warrior spirit, the want to get stronger and fight strong opponents. To prove you're stronger than everyone else." The Zune attempted to argue, but he knew the Bugman was right. He caught off the guards and allowed Cell to stay on the planet, though he wasn't allowed near any of their cities. Oh, and there was one more condition. Pui Pui would be allowed to challenge Cell whenever and wherever he wanted to. The bio-android agreed to these terms, and so, for the next few years, the four of them trained on planet Zune. And yes, I do mean the four of them. In the first month or so, we'd see various schemes and hijinks that Pui Pui attempted to pull off in order to defeat Cell, but eventually he'd simply hang out with the crew and train with them. The spaceman took up the Vegeta-type role, being the haughty, overconfident fighter that he is. That said, after a couple years, Cell began to get bored and started really ramping up the intensity of their training sessions, and while he never grievously injured anyone, the injuries certainly weren't pretty. So, since the squad had gotten plenty of gains, Cell decided maybe it'd be best to find an old Frieza planet in the hopes that it would have a healing chamber. And so, the group gathered their things and left the planet Zune, with Pui Pui actually deciding to fully join the group, stating he needed to catch up to Cell, which caused the Bugman to chuckle a bit. After a few months of travel, the group happened upon a rather interesting planet. It seemed to be mostly rocky with several giant lakes scattered around the planet. But there were several power levels in the tens of thousands there, so Cell figured it must be a Frieza-controlled planet. The group eventually spotted a large city that had a giant circular ship in the middle of it. "Yup, that's it. Remember guys, we need to keep that ship intact, so limit your blasts. Now, without further ado, I call dibs on the strong guy." Cell instantly teleported into the ship, much to the annoyance of Pui Pui, who wanted to challenge their strongest fighter too. The battle was short and sweet, with Soma only getting involved when Frieza Force soldiers attempted to attack their ship. The planet was soon liberated, with Cell easily defeating the Frieza soldier in charge with a single finger. Upon exiting the ship, there were several Kanasans who actually began cheering for the Bugman. The various warriors took off their Frieza Force uniforms and even bowed to Cell, which greatly flattered him. Finally, somebody recognized his greatness. Anyways, the group were celebrated as heroes, despite their intentions falling somewhere else. But they did enjoy the celebrations that night. Now, speaking of their intentions, Cell and the others realized they had no idea how to use the Frieza ship's healing pods, let alone the ship itself. And this is when a rather strong-looking Kanasan would make himself known. His name was Finn, and he had been one of the top engineers in the Frieza Force, though he only took the position for rebellious reasons. Regardless, in order to help out their new saviors, Finn offered his services whenever the group needed them, and need them they would. The planet's gravity was actually 10 times that of Earth's, like planet Zune, yet it was far less barren, and the food here wasn't half bad either. And so, with Finn joining the crew as their pilot and engineer, the now 5-man band trained together, with Finn and Zangia taking up more supportive roles than anything else. As the years passed, Soma began exploring the planet, fueling his love of nature and studying space creatures, while Cell wasn't looking. Meanwhile, the Bugman softened some more, enjoying the fact that so many people looked up to him. At first, it just stroked his ego, but eventually he began to see just how much influence he had, especially with Soma and the younger Kanasans. Cell remembered his plans for vengeance, but he also began to enjoy the simpler things in life, such as just relaxing and having fun light sparring matches with his son and even Pui Pui. Despite this new release on life, Cell couldn't help but feel his place wasn't on planet Kanasa. Sure, it was a lovely planet, and the people were nice and accommodating, but he had unfinished business on Earth. And so, about a year before the World Martial Arts Tournament, Cell and his crew would leave planet Kanasa for Earth. The journey would take about 3 months or so, due to using the new and improved Frieza ship. Now, while Cell was on his journey, let's talk about Earth, specifically Gohan. See, while Cell was thinking about his revenge, Gohan was thinking about how he failed to kill the Bugman, which was the catalyst for losing his father. The teenager carried a huge amount of guilt and anger in his heart for many years, this only being tempered by the likes of Krillin, Bulma, and especially Piccolo. But Gohan never forgot his failure, and even kept up with his training, promising he'd be ready if anyone ever threatened the Earth or his family again. That said, he still goes on to fight crime, although it's primarily to protect others and keep his senses sharp. However, this is around the time Cell would make his presence known. One day, as Gohan got home, he'd noticed Goten was missing, though he didn't think much of it as the boy often ran off to play in the woods. However, as dinner rolled around and Chi-Chi asked Gohan to find him, the teen would hear an eerily familiar voice from within the nearby forest. "Wow, brat, you're just like your father. That's it, keep yourself in Super Saiyan and hit me with everything you've got." Gohan immediately burst through a thicket of bushes to see Perfect Cell fighting his brother. The android looked over, a wicked smile forming on his face. "Well, hello there, son Gohan." But that's where we're going to leave things for right now. If you enjoyed this what if, I'd appreciate it if you special beam that like button or maybe even transform that subscribe button. Hope you guys have a good day or night wherever you are. That's it for now. Bye bye.